Howdy folks, it's Aries and welcome back to Mindfork. Around 2 weeks ago, I made a video about Dispatch. If you're here, then you might have seen it already. It's my most commented video, which I think is pretty interesting. I knew it was going to get a lot of feedback, but I didn't think it'd get like 3 times more comments than normal. Actually, while I remember, I got a lot of rude comments on that video, so this time around if you say something out of pocket, it's gonna go. Criticism is fine, I invite you to have proper discourse, but if you just say dumbass, I'll probably chuckle for a second because that's kind of funny. But then I'm going to get rid of it. Tell me why I'm a dumbass and I'll leave it up. Probably. Oh, and before we get into it, massive spoiler warning. I'm about to go over 3/4 of the entire game now that episode 5 and 6 are out, so play it yourself before you watch this. It'll actually save me having to over-explain what's going on too if you already know the gist of it anyway. So, in that video, I basically made a few predictions based on the first 2 episodes in the trailers. I didn't bother making another video last week when episodes 3 and 4 came out because there wasn't a lot to talk about that warranted a whole new discussion. However, with a bit more information on Shroud in episode 5 and 6, especially with the new comic, and especially since we're less than a week away from having all of our questions answered, I thought we should give it one last go. Let's start with the ideas I had last time. I'd recommend going back and having a look since I'm going to grossly oversimplify here, but basically I said that 15 years ago, Shroud and Robert's father, Astral, created the Astral Pulse together. Then when Shroud tried using the Pulse for something else, perhaps something less than legal, he and Astral got into an argument that ended in Shroud accidentally taking Astral's life. Devastated by guilt, Shroud let himself be caught and spent the next decade and a half in prison, only to find that Astral's son, Robert, had taken the Mega Man mantle in place of his father. And so, to prevent him from ruining his life in the same way heroism ruined Astral's and his own, Shroud breaks out, immediately goes after Robert to get the pulse, and kills Mega Man. I'm happy to report that my theory is still technically in the clear. In fact, as some of you pointed out in the comments section of that video, there were some little pieces of potential evidence that do indeed support this. However, although that theory hasn't been disproven, with the new information that's come to light, I do have some minor changes. I understand that lily padding when the theory doesn't 100% line up is odd for us here at Mindfork, but remember, I'm not jumping ship entirely, just boarding up some small issues I have in hindsight. So where do we start? Well, I think we should address those little pieces of potential evidence that I mentioned before. Details that support the original theory, since I need all the wins I can get at this point. The first is Royd. When we first get to working on the Mega Man suit in SDN, Royd tells us that when he was younger, he had a conversation with Astral after getting caught robbing a Radio Shack, where he learnt a little bit about him, specifically saying,
"See, there's gearheads, then there's science nerds. One kind garage, the other kind lab, you know. Your father was a good gearhead, but I just can't see how he'll make something like the Pulse."
Which obviously suggests that Astral wasn't the one that made the Pulse. Of course, this is just a second-hand opinion from someone who knew Astral for an hour, but it's definitely not something to dismiss given Royd's expertise, especially when we pair it with the 3rd issue of the Dispatch comics. The story starts in 1999, where Astral, Chase, and the rest of the Brave Brigade are present for a barbecue, a cookout, except this is at a time where Shroud, Elliot Connors, is not part of the group yet. Chase and Astral are discussing whether they should let Elliot into the group, with the man himself approaching the two about the proposition, eager to get accepted. He tries calling for a vote from all the members right then and there, but Astral shuts him down using a bit of a mean-spirited joke, causing Chase to spit out his drink and drench Elliot's face, making a device installed into the side of his head violently malfunction. He walks away, a bit pissed off, but looks ultimately unharmed. There's more to the story, but it's not relevant here, so if you're curious, I would highly suggest getting it for yourself. It's amazing. The artist did some really good work, some phenomenal work even. Fuck, that was awful. That was awful. There's a few things to point out here. The first is that about halfway through Chase and Astral's conversation, Chase says, "You got the Astral Pulse out of him," which basically confirms that Shroud is the one that made the Pulse. But then the next question you inevitably ask is, well, if Shroud made the Pulse, why doesn't he just make it again? There's a few answers, but the one I like the most relates back to my own theory. Royd tells us what he thinks of Astral. He's a gearhead, he knows mechanics, engineering, machines. It's how he was able to keep the suit running himself after getting it from his own father. Whereas Shroud is the lab geek. He knows physics, chemistry, biology, science. It's how he's able to create augmentations for the superpowered and unsuperpowered alike. Combine them together and you create the Astral Pulse, a marvel of science condensed into a tiny machine. The next thing is the conversation itself. The way Chase talks about the Shroud situation implies that the deciding factor of whether he's accepted into the group or not isn't the brigade as a whole, it's Astral. Remember when I mentioned that Astral shut him down using a bit of a mean-spirited joke? Well, to summarise that brief conversation, Elliot had suggested that they all vote for his admission into the group, and Astral replies with, "That's not how this works." Not, "We're not doing this right now," or "maybe at a better time," but "that's not how this works." Implying that the vote doesn't even matter, that it's entirely up to Astral. This also sheds a bit of light on Elliot as a character too, because of how hard he's trying to get in. This dynamic between them is not healthy. On Elliot's side, he wants nothing more than to be a member of the Brave Brigade, so much so that he's willing to hand out sophisticated and powerful technology to them, and they, or at least Chase, are willing to kiss his ass, as he puts it, to have these upgrades. So what exactly does this mean? Well, for Elliot, it's a need. For the members, it's a want. So the dynamic is always going to be tilted against Elliot. I want you to think back to how Elliot looked in his mugshot, and now I want you to look at how he looks in the comic. These are almost two different people. In fact, if they hadn't called Elliot, well, Elliot, then I wouldn't have even believed that this was the same character. Future Aries here, I forgot to mention that their eyes are also a different colour, and so I've made the executive decision to disregard this detail as a continuity error, since looking through the comic, I saw some other similar inconsistencies. Astral and Chase's own colour palettes are different, sure, but also some details around the Mega Man suits, both Astral's and Robert's. So although it's potentially an issue, I won't be changing the foundation of my theory based solely because Shroud's eyes are a different colour. So, yeah. Now, back to the video. Now, if this is Elliot, then what happened? Well, if we go off what I said earlier, then it's entirely possible that Elliot was used and mistreated for a very long time while in the care of the brigade. In my last theory video, I said that Shroud was the one that did a heel turn, but what if it was the other way around? Consider this. It's 1999. Elliot is an up-and-coming superhero wanting to use his technology for the betterment of humanity, and so he approaches one of the most well-known superhero groups in Los Angeles, the Brave Brigade, currying their favour by giving them all manner of gifts and upgrades to boost their powers and convince them to let him join. He even helps Astral create a new energy source for his Mega Man suit, the Astral Pulse. Then, one day, Elliot gets the good news. In exchange for his help in making the Brave Brigade stronger, he'll be granted entry into the group. And Elliot is ecstatic. He's finally getting a chance to play in the big leagues with other heroes. But as days, weeks, months and years go by, the Brave Brigade's treatment of Elliot gets worse and worse. His enhancements are being taken for granted, and more is being taken from him with every passing day. He begins losing weight from all the stress, and his skin turns sickly, and he barely has any time to take care of himself with the increasing demands of the team. One day, it's a step too far. Astral pushes Elliot just enough to make him snap. He shoots Astral in the chest while his guard is down, one quick decision to end the suffering and stop Astral from taking any more. But after the dust settles and the carnage is over, all it leaves is a single broken man standing amidst the rubble. He gave everything to these people, his talents, his treasures, his dreams, his mind, his friendship, and they left him with nothing. But even after all of that, these are still people he tried to help. These were once people he cared about, and he genuinely wanted to see them succeed. Would he have stayed for so long if he didn't? And so he goes to prison, and he stays there for 15 years. There's nothing for him out there anymore. It all ended when the brigade did. But one day, he sees the suit again, now in the hands of Astral's son, Robert, and he is furious. Not at Robert, at Mega Man. Such a symbol should not be allowed to exist. Not after what happened to him, to all of them. And Robert? He was just a boy when Astral died. He didn't know any better. He couldn't have known any better. And so, Elliot breaks out and disables the Mech Man suit. He wants Robert to live, to be better than his father, to be better than him, to leave the false veil of heroism behind and make something new, something deserving of his good nature. The whole point of the game is that you don't need a suit, you don't need any specific powers, you don't even need to be a good person to make the world just a little bit better than how you found it. Elliot still wants the Astral Pulse for whatever reason. It's likely one of the most powerful and sophisticated energy sources in the world. But that isn't Shroud's only goal. He returns betrayal with betrayal, destroying the team that abused his abilities. But Robert never hurt him, so why would he hurt Robert? And that's all, folks. Not a lot has changed from my original theory, mainly just the circumstances that surround Shroud's detonation. Give me your own theories in the comments below, join me for the ride if you fancy, and I hope to see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.